Greg and Lucy had been married for 4 years, but their story began at a mutual friend's birthday party, where they hit it off almost instantly. After dating for a few months, Greg invited Lucy to move into his apartment. She was thrilled to leave her parents' house, eager to start a life with him. 6 months later, Greg proposed. Lucy had always dreamed of a grand wedding, and she wasn't about to settle for anything less. The couple took out a loan to afford the lavish celebration, but luckily, the monetary gifts they received covered most of the expenses. Once the wedding was checked off Lucy's list, she set her sights on her next goal, a full renovation of their small, somewhat outdated apartment. Greg, being practical, tried to make small improvements where he could. He replaced old fixtures, repainted the walls, and made minor upgrades. But Lucy wanted more. She wanted a complete overhaul. Unfortunately, they simply didn't have the funds for it. Taking out another loan was out of the question, so she switched tactics. Every few days, she would prod Greg, her words laced with frustration. "You're really good at what you do. Other firms should be begging you to work for them, and yet you're still slaving away for pennies at this company. If you found something better, we could finally fix this place up and go on real vacations instead of once every 5 years." Greg understood where she was coming from, but it still stung. He had already asked his bosses for a raise multiple times, only to receive empty promises. He wasn't the type to quit impulsively. He wanted to secure a solid opportunity before making a move. But Lucy's patience was running thin. One night, after yet another argument over money, Greg remained non-committal, unwilling to make reckless decisions just to appease her. Lucy, offended, turned cold. She barely spoke to him, and when she did, it was distant and clipped. Even the way she served dinner changed, like she was doing him a favor. Around this time, she also started staying late at work more often. When Greg asked about it, she shot back sarcastically, "I'm earning money for the renovation." But Greg wasn't convinced. Her paychecks still seemed to be spent mostly on herself, and her late nights became more frequent. Something wasn't adding up. Then, one afternoon, Greg happened to be running errands near Lucy's office. He stopped outside for a quick smoke and, by chance, ran into an old friend, Vince. "Long time no see. What brings you here?" Greg asked. "Working security now in that building," Vince replied, pointing at the office tower with pride. It was a stroke of luck. Greg confided in Vince about his suspicions and asked if there was any way to check the security footage. Vince, wanting to help, obliged. Greg watched as Lucy left work on time every single day, despite claiming she had been working late. One recording in particular caught his attention. On that day, she exited the building chatting happily with a well-dressed man before getting into a taxi. The man, however, drove off in his own car. "Vince, who's that guy in the suit?" Greg asked, his stomach twisting with unease. "Oh, him. That's the big boss, the head of the firm," Vince answered. Greg felt a cold dread settle in his chest. Where was Lucy going in that taxi? Why had her boss taken a separate car? Seemed too calculated. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was seriously wrong. Determined to get to the truth, Greg checked the footage from multiple days. A pattern emerged. On all the nights Lucy claimed to be working late, she was leaving at the usual time. And sometimes, just like before, her boss wasn't far behind. Greg decided to follow her. One evening, he took a day off from work, citing family reasons, then rented a car and parked near her office. As expected, Lucy left right on schedule. This time, she wasn't talking to anyone, but her boss stepped out of the building a minute later. They didn't interact, but before Lucy hopped into a taxi, she threw him a smile that sent Greg's blood boiling. Heart pounding, he tailed the cab as it wove through the city. 15 minutes later, it pulled up in front of a luxury hotel. Lucy stepped out and stood by the entrance. Not long after, her boss arrived. They walked inside together. Greg's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He watched them approach the check-in desk, where the clerk handed over a key. That was all the confirmation he needed. Fury surged through him as he stormed through the hotel doors. "Lucy!" he called out sharply. She froze but didn't turn around. Greg marched up to her and spun her around by the arm. Her face went pale. "What are you doing here with this guy?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Lucy stammered. "Greg, it's just a meeting with business partners. We're heading to the lounge area." Greg's gaze snapped to the hotel key in her boss's hand. "Right. A meeting that requires a hotel room key," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Lucy had no answer. "You're disgusting," Greg spat. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, he thought about smashing his boss's smug face in, but he forced himself to walk away. "After your meeting, don't bother coming home. I'll drop your stuff at your parents' place," he threw over his shoulder before storming out. As he drove home, Greg debated how much to tell Lucy's parents. Then he remembered how her mother was always prying into their finances, always questioning why they hadn't renovated yet. Maybe she deserved the full story. And so, he packed Lucy's belongings, drove to her parents' house, and laid it all out. "Congratulations," he said as he dumped her bags at their doorstep. "Your daughter will be moving back in. Hope you're proud of her." Lucy's parents stood in stunned silence as he walked away, heading straight to file for divorce. In the weeks that followed, Greg made some big changes. He quit his job, one that had never appreciated him, and quickly secured a better-paying position elsewhere. As for Lucy, she remained at her firm for a while, but soon enough a younger hire caught the boss's eye. The attention she had once enjoyed disappeared overnight. Her boss became dismissive, then critical, until eventually, he fired her over a costly mistake. Her grand plan, cozying up to the boss for a better life, had crumbled. Now jobless and humiliated, Lucy had no choice but to move back in with her parents.